Welcome to the project, everyone. Today we have the workhorse for Ready Set Projects right here. This is our editing station, and man, has it served us well. But it's in the shop today because there's some much needed upgrades, and we kind of need to do it. I want to get another Crosstrek piece up, but this could really help us sooner than later. So it's really dusty. I've kind of neglected it for a little bit. Let's clean it up and we'll get to talking about it a little bit. That looks a lot better. Now I feel like I can actually show you underneath. So this is a rig completely built by yours truly. And actually I do have some videos about this, but on a different channel. This is before the project channel, the Ready Set Projects, was actually a thing. So I really like this setup, but I also don't like this setup either. So to just go through it, we have an ASRock, I think that's how you say it, an ASRock X570 motherboard, and then we've got Corsair memory that matches to the processor, which is a Ryzen 3700. And then for the graphics card, we went with an AMD. This is an MSI, and it's the RX 5700 XT. Got a Corsair RM750X power supply, and then I used to have an AOI on this, and then we actually went to custom water cooling. So I did these bends, as you can tell. I did it with a soldering heat gun, like a rework gun, and I couldn't heat up the pipe really evenly. So yeah, some of my bends are pretty bad, but I thought about this setup like for weeks on end and like shopped so rigorously for the parts. And I really loved it. So I got this whole new case. This is a Linley Lawncool 2, I think, if I remember correctly. It's been a while now. And we have this huge triple rad up front. And then I love these flat FLT reservoirs and pump. I think it's a D5 pump. It's the one that's a little noisier, but better head pressure. So we have the flat reservoir here, and I have it right up against the glass, which means we can't use any of these fittings on the front here, which kind of sucks if I'm honest. But it means we get to use this output right here, which goes up to the processor, and then over and all the way down into the basement. And I really love this basement. I love the fact that you can kind of peek down into there. We've got the hot swap bays, but it goes down into the basement, into the rad, out the other side of the rad, behind the reservoir, and back into the reservoir. But as much as I love this, it's also a bit of a pain to bleed the bubbles out of it. And so my CPU water block up here, there's always a bubble in there. Like, maybe you can't see that right now, but if I tip it, like this whole upper piece right here is just a big old bubble. And that worries me, because like the water block, I feel like it should be like water all the time. And I don't know, I guess you just have to get your entire water system bled of bubbles, and then you can finally try to bleed that out. But then of course the reservoir, it probably traps bubbles like entering and leaving from the bottom, which sure, fair enough. And then the other thing too is right here on this FLT res, you can tell that they have it kind of come off right here, and they have this diverter to help not have bubbles suck back in. And it kind of works, but bubbles get caught up right here all the time, and it's a huge pain. And then the biggest part to this is that my drivers, I swear it's my graphics card driver. I don't know if it's this graphics card or specifically the drivers with it, but I've tried to keep up to date on all the drivers, and it still has just like crashed on me randomly. I mean, in some cases worse than others, but like I have been playing some Tarkov lately. Granted, this is mainly for editing, but Tarkov, it just seems to like crash all the time. But it has crashed while video editing, and the big kicker on this is that Premiere does not support hardware acceleration nearly like it should, and so we kind of need to upgrade this a bit. Right now, because this can't do hardware acceleration for video encoding, it's mainly relying on the CPU, and it sucks. The last thing I will say about this whole setup is that we actually did a decent bit of work to get the RGB to work. like we want. In that other video I talked about, this water block and this reservoir is not Corsair. But we have Corsair RAM and some Corsair other pieces. So like all these maglev fans. And so what we actually ended up doing was modifying the RGB in the reservoir and in the water block so that way we could actually incorporate it in to our Corsair lighting solution, because these are simple addressable LEDs in here. And so yeah, you can go watch that video, but it's pretty cool. Like all of the lighting in this thing is controlled by Corsair, and I really love it. You know, one place I can change all the lighting, and this, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's fun to see it all together. So before we did the custom water cooling, I built this machine, like I spec'd out all the parts and everything, kind of before the GPU market went crazy, like 3 or 4 years ago. So I've been really happy with this hardware, but again, it's been limiting. You know, we're relying on the CPU, and the GPU could definitely be a lot better. So now that the graphics card market has kind of cooled off again, we got some good upgrades. I'm gonna switch over to doing an NVIDIA graphics card. You know, I do know that like some of the new graphics card you can do like maybe the shared memory if you have AMD and AMD, I forget what they call that. But, you know, it's been such a pain with this RX 5700 XT that I decided, let's actually try NVIDIA. This is actually used and a decent price. It still costs like an arm and a leg, but 3080 Ti should give us some pretty good performance. And then rather than a Ryzen 3000, a 3700, we're gonna go with a Ryzen 5000, and this is the 5950X. Between the 5950X and the NVIDIA graphics card, hopefully 4K video editing will be a lot smoother. Because, forgot to mention this, but the other huge thing that has been such a pain is that with this in Premiere just really struggles, especially with the 4K with time lapses, which is like our entire channel. And it makes it a huge pain. Granted, my wife does the editing, and so she not only watches our child, but also edits at the same time, and it's becoming more and more difficult. The amount of time she has to spend editing is like really short. So with Premiere kind of lagging a bit, with some of the crashes and everything, it just makes it a lot harder to keep up with the editing if we're having to deal and wait and all of that. Like if we can just have it smooth running, sit down, get to work, and bust it out, it's gonna be a lot better. And so that's really where we're looking for the return on investment of this. Not really with gaming, not with any of that, but just straight up video editing. This should kick the pants off of this current setup. But I'm worried we're gonna have to change the water cooling. So, man, I talk way too much, but it's because I really love everything. I really love everything that I do, and I really, you know, poured my heart and soul into this setup, and so sorry if I blab too much, but I just figured, you know, maybe this information can help someone else. This is used, we actually kind of need to clean this off. This is brand new, and we need to drain the water. So let's get this out of the way and start draining the water. So with my first water cooling setup, I thought I was the bee's knees because I love the basement, and I thought I was making it super convenient by putting this little valve over here. So out of the way, I can take off this valve and put in my little adapter and then drain water. I might need to get a longer tube than this though. We finally got everything disassembled, and I threw the 3090 or 3080, sorry, the 3080 in there, and it looks like, yeah, I mean, it can fit in this original setup. But I'm kind of tempted, if we're already in here, to maybe redo this. There's a bit of thinking I need to do, and I do see that I have neglected this too much. So I'm going to have to take apart all my tubes and clean everything really well. because there's a bit of grime built up in there. So I need to change my water more in the future. I understand. And so that's kind of the hard thing I got to do. Do I want to change the tubing setup in this so that way I actually I'm more inclined to actually change the water in this thing? Because like right now it's just hidden behind the screen, so maybe a bit more form over function, or no, a bit more function over form. But at least there's nothing too bad. If I really wanted, I could slap this all together with the tubes we have after I clean them. We do need to bring more power out here, and then I could run this. One thing I did notice, there's like this little switch. This is OC or normal. I think it's like overclocking. I don't know, I haven't looked into that too much. And then we also have like auxiliary fans. So I'm guessing this can control a fan over the top of it. And also I think there is a port for RGB. If that is to control the RGB on this, that would be awesome. I would love to pipe that RGB into the Corsair stuff, and then I can have also my graphics card on the same thing. But that's getting a little ahead of myself. It's all to it. I need to pull out this reservoir because we got to clean it, and I need to do some thinking. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then we'll get back together when I have a better plan. Well, that is some of the cleaning out of the way. I did as much as I could with the toothbrush in there. I did order some pipe brushes so we could actually like clean a lot of these threads and the inside of these tubes. And also a lot of these fittings and stuff, I think it'll be a lot easier when I actually have the pipe brushes on there. So we did the main stuff that we could just do with the toothbrush. Something to note is that, yeah, water is pretty dang corrosive. If you look at these, the two worst ones, or no, this guy right here, I'm pretty sure is the one that was right by the pump where it was flowing a bunch. This was right by the outlet where it was flowing a bunch. And I think this one was near-ish the pump. And so like all the ones that have water flow right next to it, they just look wrecked. But the one that was kind of over where there wasn't as much water flow and it was just sitting looks a lot better. And that's the same thing to go, or that's the same story with this bottom plate for the, I don't even know what they call this. I know there's a name, but this is the part that actually sits against the processor, the heat spreader, and then they have a bunch of these slits, and so that's where like the heat gets transferred to the water. And this, like the nickel plating, I'm pretty sure this is a solid piece of copper that's nickel plated. The nickel plating is like worn off, and you can even see some of the corrosion from the copper, that green color in there. But I will say, taking this all apart, I'm not as worried about having a bubble up here, because I'm like, what the heck, why would they design it where a bubble's just always going to get trapped here when it's sitting in like an upright position? Well, it's because the water coming in, which, yeah, you do really need to listen to the inlet versus outlet. The water coming in gets shoved in through here, in through this spreader piece. It's like in through that little tiny slit, which that's right up against all these fins. So the water gets forced. There's no bubbles in here. The water gets forced through the fins, and then if there's a bubble after the fact, I mean, whatever. The water's already taken all the heat out of it and is going to start leaving. So at least a bubble in here doesn't mean that the processor's not being cooled properly. It's just like cosmetic thing, which, you know, If you don't look, it doesn't matter that much. That does bring me to these. So here's the RGB strip that's for the EK water block, or sorry, the EK flat reservoir. And as you can see, we did modify this. There wasn't a lot of space, but I used 30 gauge solid core, and I was able to squeeze it right next to the inside of the cases for the LEDs. And that's how we brought that out. And if you didn't watch the other video, but essentially how these individually addressable LEDs work is that there's one data line, and then they take the first packet and pass it on. So you have to continue that chain of the data. The data out of this needs to go to the data in of this. And looking at this guy, it looks like the data in is this pin, and the data out is that pin. You can see a tiny trace going over to the data in of the next guy. And I do know from playing around with this, this is the first LED, this is the last LED, and they go counterclockwise like that. So that's where it's a little annoying with EK. Rather than being able to like daisy chain these and get the data continue on to the next thing, they just cut off, like it's literally this pin right here could have been brought out to here and soldered in one more wire, and then you could easily daisy chain this. But they didn't do that, so I might try to do a quick little modification to this. It's going to be trying to solder a wire to that pin right there without touching that cap, and it'll be a little bit hard, but I think it'll be worth it. We have it apart, so we might as well get that done. And then if we do have more down the road, I don't have to put this at the end. I could have this in the middle and then like cut everything up like it should. So let's put this in the vise and get ready to try soldering it. So there's the modification. Just a really quick tack right there for soldering that 30 gauge on. Bring it down, wrap it around the wire so it kind of stays with it. On the other one, I made it so I could unplug the 30 gauge or unplug the extra wire in there, but I didn't see any need, so I just wrapped it all the way around and put it in to here. If I need to, I can cut it and modify it later. But yeah, so there we go. Now this is fully incorporated into the Corsair hub and stuff, and I can put in more devices after this and still have the data make it all the way around and all the way back to the hub. So there we go. Now we've modified both of them. But there's more to talk about with the computer real quick. So now back to the computer itself. I did throw in the new graphics card, and I did bring this new cable out in there. We have a 750 watt power supply, which is what they suggested on this. Hopefully that should be good. I wish I had more headroom, but that's fine. The main thing is that I've ordered parts, and I didn't think I needed to do that at first, but we're going to be changing up a few things in here. So I have parts on the way to really help with finishing out this build, but I still need this, at least for now, to have Sammy continue editing. So I want to swap in the new processor, and I'm probably just going to throw on the air cooler for the 3700. It's probably not necessarily sufficient, but for now it should at least get us up and running. And I do have new RAM and a few other goodies that I'll show you when we get them. But at least that'll get us up and running. So we kind of need to get this back together. So I actually need to pull out this graphics card, do one thing down here, and then change up that. So let's get to it. This should be good for now. We got the AMD cooler on there. That should work for now. We've got our little wire ties jinkly on there. I mean, this should at least get us up and editing until we get the parts coming in, and then we'll snap to then. Now that we have everything clean, we can finally start putting this back together and really figuring out our tube situation. We do need to pull off the air cooler for that, put back on the water block and everything, and we have a couple other upgrades that we're doing at the same time. One of them is we're switching over to Optane. So if you didn't know, Intel's having a fire sale. They've ditched the technology, but this might actually help us. I'm thinking if we can use this as the scratch disk for Premiere, it might actually help speed things up a little bit. So we're trying it out. We got Optane, which is a U.2 drive into a PCIe card. This is a PCIe 16 by 16 lane. But really, if you look at the back here, only by 8 is connected. So all of these other contacts are really just for show. One other thing about this is, other than this isn't actually 16, I would get one that has the back open so that way it can breathe. Optane actually does get pretty dang hot. And then lastly, the screws that I've got a couple of these adapters to see which one would work best. And every single one of them came with screws that have like a countersink head on it. So it's like beveled, and when you're going against flat edges on a PCB, it's just gonna destroy the PCB. So use the screws that came with your 905P drive, and then that should be a lot better. That'll put like the pressure in the right places for it. I like this one, other than it's not actually 16, but pretty good. So yeah, we're gonna be installing this. This will be our main boot drive. We've got new memory that will actually match our new CPU in there. And I don't know if I talked about this, but I'm gonna try putting the water intake and output from the radiator up at the top here. And yeah, nothing left to it but to do it. So let's go. Oh wait, sorry. Also, one other thing is I'm gonna be swapping over cables because this is just kind of ugly, and so they can't make this bend that well. It's all in the way. So from a different power supply, I have cables that should work better for this. So swap out cables, put in Optane, start the water cooling, put on the water block, put in the memory, start bending the tubes, and we should be there. Should be there. That's the radiator in there. We got our reservoir in here. I might figure out some sort of mount right here to keep it from being able to wobble back and forth. But now we need to make the tubes. So need to come out, and it'll be a tight squeeze between the GPU and the reservoir. Or sorry, the pump here on the reservoir and the GPU. There's a tiny little space in here. But I think I can squeeze up, come over, and then down into here. So that'll be 2 bends. Then we got another one that is 2 bends. This one will come out of the water block and then up into the radiator. And then I think I'm actually going to use this tube from the last build to go down from the radiator and into the bottom of the reservoir. Now, it's not ideal that you know, all the air bubbles and stuff is going to be coming out right next to the pump intake there. But this should be a lot better where the bubbles are just needing to go straight up. When I had it laid down flat, the bubbles wanted to come up and then they would get sucked back in. So this should hopefully at least help a little bit. And you know, if there was any other side ports, I'd probably use them, but the only 2 side ports are here on the bottom. And you know, if I flip it up, then the bubbles will be at the top and just suck it in. So we're making the best of what we have. And I'm gonna use this one. I made a really ugly bend, and I think this is because I didn't heat it up enough. I might reuse this. I might remake it now that I'm looking at it. Now that we can do a little bit better. So let's get to making the tubes, and then we can clean up some of this wiring in the back. We got all the tubes done. I mean, they didn't come out super straight. The problem is that the pump comes down and kind of runs into there. So the run coming from the radiator is a little wonky, and then it's such a squeeze between the pump and the GPU that it's also a little wonky. I tried to get them lined up pretty well, but I really just think I'm not that good at hardline water cooling. If I do this again, I'm either gonna not video it and take my time completely, or I'm just gonna do soft lines. I don't know. I just don't think it's me. I struggle every single time. But anyways, so I got rags in there just to make sure nothing leaks. We're gonna fill it up, and what I have set up here is actually another power supply that I can just turn on and off with this little switch. So it's only going to the pump. So then without any power anywhere else, I can at least turn on and off the pump. So I'm gonna set you guys up and let's get this filled up and see if there's any leaks. Also, I will say in here, the water block was a little destroyed, and I think that's because I was using distilled water. So I am gonna go with EK Cryofuel. This is just the clear one. We'll see how this runs, but I figured, I don't know, we could give it a go this time and see if we notice anything different. So it's always a little nerve-wracking. All right, I got the panels all together. I did some wire management on the back, but honestly, the wire management kind of needs to be redone. So I had it managed down to like the zip tie. It's in there, just don't look back there. There's the beauty panels. So, you guys ready? Okay, and... uh-oh. Alright, I think I know what the issue is. I really like these cables, but they are from a different power supply. And yeah, I think that's what was causing it. Because I go like this, yeah, sure, the GPU's like, we don't have power. But like everything else starts up, so... alright, we gotta replace these cables. Alright, so I should have just looked at this. If you guys notice, the pinout on these is not the same. You notice how this one's missing that and that one's missing that. So, lesson learned, don't mix power supply cables unless you know for sure. All right, now this should be back up and functional. Look at that. And it's even got the RGB working. I have it really dark so that way, yeah, it's not super rainbow. But of course the new graphics card and the new memory is super rainbow. And all of these little bubbles, they'll go away in a few weeks, or like in the coming weeks, I should say. But yeah, there we go. Well guys, the computer is working. Finally our editing machine is back up and running, which is good. Yes, I'm gonna put the front plate on. I'm gonna work on getting the RGB more matched. But look, it's working. No leaks, and it's a lot more serviceable. I'm pretty sure I can get the graphics card out without draining the water loop, and bubbles aren't gonna get sucked in as much, and I don't think the bubble's gonna get caught in the water block either. So really happy with how it came out. I know I was tempted to do a water block on the GPU, but you know, that's a really good design, really well designed cooler, and yeah, anyways, I left it. So, whew, it is late. Well guys, that'll finish this project. It was a little bit of a short one, and just glad to have a water cooling video on our actual project channel. Glad to show this to you guys. This is the editing machine, so all the videos you see is going to be coming off of this. And when I had the air cool on it, I did some testing and everything, and I'm pretty sure the Optane with all of this, I mean, it's going to be even better with the RAM. We can finally actually like do time lapses in 4K. And we might need to switch around the scratch disk and stuff, but if it's not solved, we'll put in a clip, but assume that it's solved. It's up and running. Looks dang good. Woo! It's late, I'm getting weird. Hope you guys hit the subscribe button so we can see you on the next one. Leave a comment, we love reading them, and hope you guys have a great day. And I hope if you do hard lines that they look better than mine, because again, I do not think it's my thing. But, you know, we have it, and it was fun. Love you guys, we'll see you next time. Bye.